Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Addie Bink, and I'm a digital content producer here with Local 5. We are getting ready to break down the Packers' first week of practice. I don't know about you, but it doesn't feel like it's already the first week of practice. Joining me today are MK Burgess and Matt Reynoldson. So I'm going to toss it over to them. They're going to break down this whole week, the top headlines that we saw. If you feel like asking a question, drop it in the comments below, and they'll be sure to answer it. So without further ado, Matt and MK.
Thanks, Addie. Thanks for bringing us into this. We're glad to be breaking down our Packers live training camp report. We do this every week. This is week 3, and now we finally have some football to talk about. Packers practiced at Lambeau yesterday, first practice last Saturday, and now we're 5 in to Packers training camp. The real part of it. First takeaways of the week. I mean, MK, were a lot of those off-season questions that we thought would be answered in this first week?
So it's hard to tell, right? Because, and players and coaches have addressed that, is that you are not going to get those preseason games to kind of see where the team is at. You're also not having as many practices and that ramp-up period is so quick. One of the biggest off-season questions was the run defense. Did they fix the glaring problem that they had in that NFC Championship game? We talked to some of the position coaches today, and defensive coordinator Mike talked about how he really thinks that they have all kind of come together and figured that out. They're going to be trying different things and really kind of see different people in different spots. One of the big things that they did say, Rashawn Gary has made some major off-season moves. That man has leaned down. He had a year to kind of sit and watch behind the Smith brothers. So look for him to kind of be a key piece in being kind of that third man for the outside linebackers.
Yeah, a lot of Packer fans were looking at him to make maybe a bigger splash in his rookie season, 11th overall pick in the first round. Obviously, in 2019, the Packers had those 2 first-round draft picks on defense with Gary and safety Darnell Savage. And now in the second year, both are expected to make a pretty big jump. Savage had a really good, really strong rookie year, was named to the Pro Football Focus All-Rookie team in his debut season, and really made that splash kind of early on in those games. Gary, meanwhile, took a while to kind of get into it, but there is no mistaking his hunger for getting better. He asked outside linebackers coach Mike Smith and defensive coordinator Mike Pettin what he could do on his off day. The Packers are off today.
At 12:30 a.m. last night, he sends them a text and is like, what are three things I could do to get better? And Mike Smith goes, he is meaner than a rattlesnake, and he just wants it. I don't really know what that means, but, he just also, he could not stop singing that man's praises. Just his work ethic, his hunger, his ability to want to be better at football. And he also said that, as you said, people thought he was going to make a bigger splash, but Mike Smith said that it almost did him a service to sit and watch, because he got a year to learn behind the Smith brothers, who we can say made a huge splash last season. And so learning from those two and then slimming down and getting those techniques and those fundamentals under your belt your rookie year, has the Packers think that he's poised to be a big contribution to this defense.
Yeah, no shortage of edge rushers for the Packers defense. I mean, with Zarius and Preston Smith, and then obviously Rashawn Gary, some other guys mixing in there. As well. Tim Williams could make an impact on the outside there. He's certainly had a good training camp so far. But I think the question that everybody wants to know, we know Green Bay is going to get pass rush. We know that they're going to get those quarterback hurries, had some good sack numbers last year, really wreaked havoc on a lot of quarterbacks. But the big question is, will the run defense improve? That NFC Championship still an eyesore. Over 200 yards of rushing for the San Francisco 49ers on their way to an NFC title. Can the Packers figure it out in the middle, especially on that run defense, and can Christian Kirksey be a big part of that?
So that's the thing that most people talked about, and he himself talked about the fact that he's been injured for the past 2 seasons, and he looks healthy. He looks great. He had the first interception at training camp this week, picking off Aaron Rodgers, and he just looks like he's commanding. He's that leadership right there in the middle that you need. He is a veteran. He's got Dean Lowry on one side. Ty Summers is going to be in the mix there as well. Then you've got Kenny Clark, who the man got paid. First day of practice, the man gets paid. Highest paid nose tackle in the league. and I think that kid's only 23. And so I just think that you are solidifying, and you add a veteran piece like Kirksey, if he stays healthy, to really kind of sew up that question mark that I think the Packers were missing towards the end of last season, because I think their defense looked strong at the beginning, and then it was there in the middle. They got better towards the end, and then, as you said, the NFC Championship game was not pretty by any means.
And with Christian Kirksey as that Mike linebacker, they'll be expecting him to probably be a lot better in coverage than Blake Martinez was last year. Obviously, Martinez a very productive player,
extremely,
left in free agency. But switching gears, we'll come back to the defense in a little bit, especially if we get some questions about it. But switching gears to the offense now, a lot of questions on the receivers.
Right.
Can this receiving group make a big jump, especially in the second year of Matt LaFleur's system? Will it be more run first? What does Aaron Rodgers' progression look like? What will we see from the offense this year, and have they answered some of those questions about who that number 2 receiver will be so far in training camp? MK.
I think right now number 1 is going to be Devontae. As for number 2, I think they're still trying a lot of things out. We saw a lot of different guys get looks. You saw Tyler Ervin getting look as a receiver this week in practice. So, is he going to stay on special teams, or is he going to be thought into the mix? He looked really good this week. Another person, Alan Lazard, looks to build off of his big breakout year that he had last year, and you can kind of see that chemistry with him and Rodgers is still very much alive. And another person that looked really good is Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Drop-off, we learned from him when he talked to him earlier this week, is that he was still beating that nagging ankle injury. So he said he wasn't 100% towards the back end of the year, and he kept trying to play through it, but maybe that was a disservice to him to kind of wait until he was 100%. But he's looked good in practice this week as well. And then another person is EQ. St. Brown is back, and he missed all of last season due to an injury right at the end of training camp. And so, is he back? Is he at the health level? And LaFleur, Rodgers, everyone in that wide receiver room has just been saying that he looks great, and they expect him to be a big contribution as well.
When I watched practice on Wednesday over at Ray Nitschke Field, EQ, Equinemius St. Brown, was one of those guys that stood out, especially in the route running. He could be such a big piece. He's a unicorn. I mean, he's 6'4", 6'5", runs a 4.3. You're not going to see many guys like that. I mean, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, also just one of those freak athletes.
Right. His speed is insane.
Rodgers has some absolute trees to throw
he does. Lazard's really, really tall as well. And so I think it's his offensive line is one of the most veteran. You've got all those different guys who have been together for a while in the NFL, and so then you add that in if with these receivers, if they can all get clicking and all get going, I think the offense has a position to be really, really good. But you also can't miss out on the running backs. You've got A.J. Dillon coming in as a rookie, and then you have Aaron Jones. The man had 16 touchdowns last year. Yep. Jamal Williams also in that mix. So, I mean, people talk about it. It's hard. There's no preseason to really get a look at it. And as we said, it is only the first week of practice. They went to pads on day 3. They are just now starting to hit people and get up to speed. But first few days, offense isn't looking too bad.
Wanted to answer our first question we have on Facebook here. Is Jake Kumro still on the roster? Yes, he is. He is very much in the mix to once again make that 53-man roster. Obviously a fan favorite, being a Wisconsin Whitewater grad. Played some really good football last year, especially in that first half of the season. Became kind of a revolving door last year after Devontae Adams came back, but really, really stepped up in Adams' absence last year, and will again be a fan favorite. Rodgers has had some really nice throws to Kumro so far, so I'm looking to see what he can do this season.
Him and Jay Sternberger are going to be very interesting to see how they are in the mix, especially with Devin Funchess, another wide receiver. So, all of the tight ends, wide receivers, packages are just going to be very interesting to see. And it's a weird season because usually, by now we would have had a preseason game. So we would be having that to kind of talk about and see how people looked on the field. But it's week 1 of practice. They are just now getting up to pads. So I'll be really interested to see where you and I are on this team next Friday after they've got another full week under their belts.
Well, the first week, pretty good, but we have a couple storylines that have carried all the way through the offseason, especially since draft week, and really got some answers as far as, hey, what does Aaron Rodgers think? New quarterback in the room. Mm-hmm. Obviously, 3 quarterbacks on the roster right now between Rodgers, Tim Boyle, and the first-round draft pick, Jordan Love. But Tim Boyle saying earlier this week that Rodgers is the most happy he's ever seen him in training camp. Rodgers just handled this like a pro.
He really has, and Boyle alluded to that, and you know, he said he's the happiest he's ever seen him. He's cracking jokes, and then Jordan Love got asked on the other day when the rookies talked, and he just said it's been awesome sitting in that room with him and learning how he sees the field, and I can imagine that it is. I mean, you even watching Rodgers in practice, just with the finality and the laser-like focus that he is able to read a football field and read a defensive coverage and make sure that he can get it into his receivers is lights out. And so to be Jordan Love and getting to learn from somebody like that has got to be great. The other thing that both rookies, both A.J. Dillon and Jordan Love talked about was walking into Lambeau for the first time. They said it was out of this world. The Packers usually don't practice there, but they are this year to kind of get a feel for crowds, and they were pumping in some ambient noise, which they all said was a little weird. But with no fans, Matt, Lambeau's known to be being pretty loud, so this year no fans for the first 2 home games.
It'd be interesting how they regulate that. I've gotten some questions on that as well, of how the NFL is going to regulate crowd noise and pumping in crowd noise. Of course, we know the Vikings do that anyway, even when they have a full house.
Wow.
But the Packers,
ouch!
They were playing with that. They were playing with the loudspeakers and pumping the fan sound in there. So I'm assuming the NFL will regulate that, cap it at a certain level. Mm-hmm. Our meteorologist for tonight, Ryan Morse, asking who has a better shot at a Super Bowl this year, Brady or Rodgers? I think that's an interesting question, but I think the Bucks can't be the favorite to win that division. MK, both the Saints and the Bucks are on the Packers schedule this year. What are you thinking about that?
You know, I think both of those teams are going to be hard games because Brady is Brady. So, yeah. I mean, I'm sorry.
Even still at 43?
Yes. The man is fantastic. He is a deadly, deadly quarterback, and so you cannot count him out anytime he's on any kind of team. I'll be interested to see where they are after their first game. I want to see how he, gets with everybody. Gronk is back in that mix. How he's reacting with all of those new wide receivers, how he's reacting with that offensive line. I mean, he has had that offensive line in New England for his career. And so moving to a new scheme, a new place, playing in the Florida humidity is not like playing in New England.
Right.
And so, I mean, you walk outside and you feel like you've gone swimming. So that's going to be really interesting. The Saints are also just so good and such a veteran squad that I think both those games are going to be really, really tough. I also think on the road at Minnesota is a really tough week 1 for the Packers. But I don't think their schedule is very easy at all.
No, but MK, we both know the answer to this. It's Rodgers. It's always going to be Rodgers,
yeah,
right? Especially to poke fun at Brady fan Ryan Morse there.
Yeah, you're still salty that he left New England, Ryan. I mean, we don't feel bad for you and your 6 rings. No, I think the Packers have a really good shot at taking both of those games, mostly because I think their offensive line has the ability to, be that veteran squad to give Rodgers the time to do what he does. I think that now they're in year 2 of Matt LaFleur's offense, which means that everybody understands it better, because the first year when you're trying to learn a new offense, there's going to be some hiccups, there's going to be a learning curve. Year 2, everyone knows what is expected. You're not having to learn all these new plays except you're a rookie. You have the playbook, you understand what you need to do. And it's Rodgers. I mean, at the end of the day, the man just makes plays happen. He makes things happen. And so I think both those games are going to be really, really good. But I think the Packers are going to be I think they're going to be good this year.
Just to reset here, we're in the WFRV Digital Center doing our weekly Packers live training camp report. If you have a question for us, we'll answer it. Throw it in the Facebook comments. We are live on the WFRV website as well as several of our Nexstar affiliates around the around the area. We're broadcasting live in 4 states. But any comments, any questions, just leave those in the Facebook comments. We'll get to them. We've already gotten to a couple so far. So MK, I want to go through some of the storylines that we've gotten throughout the week as we hear from these interviews. Obviously very different this year with Zoom interviews, and we've seen practice. One of my favorite storylines throughout the week, I did a story on this, I believe, on Tuesday, is the secondary. Green Bay, one of the best
nasty
young secondaries. Cap age for any of the D-backs is 27 years old. They're looking like one of the best young secondaries in the NFL. And the draft picks, I mean, 3 top 35 picks starting. I mean, that's what you want for your secondary if you're going to build that out.
Well, and new DB's coach Jerry Gray was talking about them today on Zoom calls, and he just said the athleticism with them is unparalleled, and then their willingness to sit and watch film and learn. And he says that's kind of where you run into problems with just athletic kids, is they don't want to put in the extra work. But the defensive backs for Green Bay, he said they're so hungry that they are willing to watch film and learn from what they did last year and transition it into better for this year. And I think that was kind of the theme with all of the defensive coaches talking to them today, is that everyone knew what their problem was last year, and to be able to move forward and to get better and to just have that higher level of expectation of, okay, this is where we were and this is where we want to be this year, is just has all the coaches excited, especially with such an odd offseason where you didn't have OTAs, you have no preseason,
right.
You don't really have any way to kind of have like a starting point of like, this is where we are this season. It's just kind of like, we have basically 4 weeks to get ready. We have 23 days until the season. I need everybody to give us 110% because this is all we have until we have to go to Minnesota and run into the Vikings.
Going to another one of our Facebook comments, Facebook questions. Seeing the start of camp, do you think Lazard, MVS, and EQ would be a better combo, a better option, and it justifies the criticism for not drafting a wide receiver? That's an interesting question because I think you can add more bodies. They've tried to add more bodies off the waiver wire. You saw Malik Turner off the Seattle Seahawks added to the Packers. They're looking for more competition there. But seeing the start of camp, I mean, and you can speak to this as well, seeing the start of camp and seeing what Equanimeous St. Brown looks like coming off that injury, what Marquez Valdez-Scantling looks like in a prove-it year, that's big. And Allen Lazard obviously emerging even from an undrafted practice squad guy, emerging last year and then really carrying that forward into being a reliable target. Honestly, MK, the passing game hasn't been great so far in camp, so I don't want to sugarcoat anything so far. But those guys running routes, I mean, you focus on the way they run routes, the way they can
looked good.
Catch balls. I mean, they look good, even if the passing game so far looks a little shoddy.
So I think it's hard to say. It's the first week of camp. Everyone's still trying to get some rust off. Everyone's still trying to figure out from that. But Lazard and MVS both said this. They said, to them, watching the draft, it didn't really matter that they didn't draft a wide receiver. Was it surprising? Yeah, but to them, Lazard just said it meant that they had faith and trust in what we already had in the room. The guys in that wide receiver room know what they have. They know what they can bring to the table. They know what kind of level of talent they are in this league. And for them, it was more motivation. For a guy like Allen Lazard, he was just like, I knew that I was going to have to come back and work and compete for my starting job. So it didn't matter who they drafted. It didn't matter to me. I was going to have to come in, and he said he works better when his back is against a wall. MVS coming in with a little bit of his chip on his shoulder, had a little bit of a drop-off, ankle injury, whatever. Matt LaFleur talked about that was probably, he alluded to him being a little bit injured at the end of last season. So, healthy him, if he's healthy, Matt, that's scary because he's so fast and he's got such speed and agility to blow people out of the water. I mean, you saw his speed where he's just blowing by defenders at the end of last season that it could just, if he's healthy, then you have Lazard in the mix and you have Davante Adams. I mean, Davante doesn't miss those 5 games. I think their season is a completely different story. So, I just think that I think those 3 getting healthy, and then you add a few other like Irvin in the mix, you add Sternberger and Kumaro. I'm not really worried about the wide receivers for for the Packers. But again, it is only week 1. So we'll check in on that question maybe like week 3 of practice, the week before the season starts.
Yeah, I like what you said about Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He really had a couple breakout games last year, especially in that game against the Raiders. The long
he looked
touchdown.
Awesome.
The image of that Lambeau leap was pretty special for MVS there, and hopefully he can carry some of that over. We wanted to focus on a little bit of the tight ends and the offensive line. We talked a bit about the offensive line, and to make a tongue-in-cheek comment, we're not allowed to say who is practicing with which unit on the offensive line, first team, second team, per new Packers rules that have gotten some maybe snarky response from some of the writers and some of the other reporters. That's all right. That's a regular season rules, and things will be back to normal when we're not in a pandemic season. But tight ends and offensive line, we'll start with the tight ends. Bobby Tonyan is set to make a big jump this year, and he's been training with now the highest paid tight end in the league in George Kittle for the San Francisco 49ers.
And they got matching hairdos.
And they got matching
man buns the other day.
Can Bobby Tonyan make that jump to be Green Bay's George Kittle?
I think he can. I think it's going to be about whether or not, he kind of buys in. And I think he has by training with someone like Kittle. I think that, if you find people that are going to push you and really challenge you to hit that level of that next step, then that can kind of help explode your own talent. I think, again, it's so hard to say because it is 1 week of practice. And so from what I've seen, I think he looks good. I think Sternberger, although Sternberger just came off the COVID reserve list, so still kind of waiting to see how he's going to look. And then I'll be really, really interested to see how Kumara looks, but he's looked good from the few looks that he's gotten in practice this week. Tanyan's going to be interesting. I think most people are worried about the wide receivers because we haven't really had a bunch of tight ends to really make mention of for the Packers in a while.
Sure.
And so if those guys have breakout years, then no one's going to be upset that they didn't draft a wide receiver because then you have all of the weapons in the passing game that you need between those 2 rooms.
Right, and obviously you have the veteran Mercedes Lewis in there, the former first-round pick, is now just kind of the senior voice in that Packers tight end room. But a lot of people have been asking on the opposite end, what about the Rook? What about rookie Josiah DeGuara out of Cincinnati? He's not really a true tight end. He's going to play some tight end. He's going to play in some of those 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets when the Packers go heavy.
He's a big guy, though.
But he's going to be a utility player, it looks like, for Matt LaFleur's offense. What have you seen from DeGuara so far? He looks smaller than what a tight end is supposed to look like.
He does look smaller, but he's stockier. So he's got that low-to-the-ground physicality. He's also looked pretty good from what I've seen. He's not been in a whole lot of stuff in the first few days, but when he does get in the mix, he does look pretty clean. He's hitting all of his formations correctly. He looks like he's looked at the playbook pretty well. So he'll be interesting as well. All of those rookies are going to be interesting. I'll be very interested to see how A.J. Dillon, who is just a freak of a man. If none of you have seen Twitter, it is leg day all day, every day.
Go look
for
up his
A.J.
tree
Dillon.
Trunks of legs.
He is just a huge individual. Raisin Bran for days is what that man must eat for breakfast. But I'm very interested to see how he is in the mix because he is way larger of a back than Aaron Jones. Yep. And they are just night and day. But you can also see A.J. Dillon's got speed for someone who's packing on that much muscle on that frame. I've also seen his hands because he's caught a few receiver passes as well. So that's just been super interesting to see as well. The offense is going to be really interesting. It's week 1 of practice. I'm super pumped to see how this all is going to tie together after 2 weeks to see how everyone really starts to gel together. But for week 1, Packers, they don't look that bad.
Yeah, they look pretty good. Here's how week 1 kind of shook out with the Packers practicing at Lambeau yesterday, just kind of resetting the week. They're back at Ray Nitschke Field tomorrow. We'll talk to Raven Green, Equinemius St. Brown, and
Will Redmond.
So 3 guys that we haven't talked to yet. Matt LaFleur will also talk tomorrow as we sort of reset the week. In those 3 weeks ramping up to game week for the Minnesota Vikings, the Packers will practice inside Lambeau 3 times. One of those already knocked out. But I think we're just resetting training camp once again. It was great to see football out there this week.
So when we talked last week, a lot of people said that it didn't feel like football had started, right? And I feel like for the first time, getting to see players on the field in helmets, first 2 days they weren't in pads and then suddenly they are. I just feel like it gives us a little bit of a sense of normalcy. One of the things that Rodgers said at the beginning of the week, though, is that it was almost a strange and sad feeling, though, because there are no fans. And he commented on the fact that the best part about the first day of training camp is you get to go ride your bikes and you get to see all those people excited for football. And if you're a veteran player, when you walk out on the field, there's this huge roar of the crowd. And they walked out on the field to a bunch of media personnel just excited to shoot some football. It's got to be different and weird for everybody. And so I feel like the first practice, everyone was excited to be there, but it was almost a little bit of a weird affair because there were no fans there. And so now that they've gotten through a week and everyone's kind of gotten used to that, and now they're just, all right, the season is coming up. I think next week we'll be really interested to see how everyone really kind of buckles down and gets into it.
Well, it's going to be a very weird year indeed, but we will have football as we wrap things up here in the WFRV Digital Center. We do this every Friday right around 3 o'clock, obviously broadcasting digitally in 4 states. So we thank everybody for joining us. You can continue to leave your comments in those Facebook comments, and we'll get to them next week if those questions still apply. And we'll continue to get to watch training camp. MK and I will be there tomorrow. Yep. So MK, thank you. Addie, we'll send it back to you, our engineer. Addie, thanks for setting this up.
Addie, you got any final questions?
Who's gonna win in week 1? Let's just do it now. Who's gonna win?
Packers.
Who's gonna walk away with it?
Yeah, I would have to say Packers. I'm gonna have to now go watch a bunch of Vikings footage to be a full-fledged committed analyst so that I can give everyone my fully committed answer. But yeah, off the top of the hat, I'll go with the Packers.
All right, so as I said, we are going to be back next week. We'll break this down again for you. Thank you to MK and Matt for joining me. Make sure to leave your questions if you have any. Take care. We'll see you next week.